Hey guys, DMS here. Today I have for you this, the HarmonicDyne Helios. Let's check it out. So this is a dynamic headphone that I got from Hi-Fi Go. They sent it to me. I am going to be sending it back afterwards, so I'm not keeping this. I'm not being paid or compensated in any way to say anything in this video. These are all my own thoughts and opinions. So let's start off with the build. I did an unboxing of this headphone a while back, which I imagine many of you have probably seen, but if you haven't, the basics are that the build of this headphone is okay. There are some spots where it shines. These yokes are particularly decent. The grill is nice. The headband leaves a little bit to be desired. I feel like this particularly right here is a weak point. It is relatively comfortable though. They did put sufficient padding on the top of the headband, which is actually unfortunately rare these days, so that is nice. The ear cups are pretty deep and the pads are a little bit wider than you would normally get in a headphone of this form factor, so there's a good bit of space in here and a good bit of depth. Behind the pad there is an angled dynamic driver. This actually looks like just a scaled up version of the Sivga SV007, so I'm under the impression this is probably either designed or manufactured by a similar OEM. Through and through, this does feel like a headphone made in China. It is nothing particularly special on the build, but as I said, it doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart in my hands. I think something like a 6XX will probably be a little bit more durable, but it's hard to say. I've had this headphone for probably about a month now. I've been using it, and I haven't had anything fall apart. I haven't felt the build change in any way since then, so I guess it's going to depend on your use case a lot. I have mostly just used it around the house. I've carted it back and forth to the office a few times, but that's really about it as far as travel is concerned, because it is an open back headphone, so I'm not really using this thing on the go. Though power-wise, you certainly could, because the efficiency is high and the impedance is low, so this is an extremely easy to drive headphone. So moving on from the build, let's talk a little bit about sound. And that's where this gets interesting, because this has some spots like the build that were pretty decent and some that just really left a lot to be desired. So the HarmonicDyne Helios overall has a bit of a V-shaped sound signature, not necessarily in sub bass, but in the mid bass and in the upper treble. So this is a very warm lower mid-range. Sub extension does roll off a bit, but it's very warm and punchy sounding, so it does have a good bit of kick to it in the low end. But your super low extended sub notes are going to roll off a bit. As you get into the upper mid-range, you get a bit of a dip, so it kind of dips back down and sounds a little bit more recessed in those regions. And then we go into a roller coaster of peaks and dips throughout the treble, and some of those peaks are very, very, very high. So it comes across sounding like a warm-leaning V-shaped headphone, basically meaning that your highs are a bit exaggerated and your lows are a bit exaggerated in certain areas. For male vocals, they did sound a bit boomy on some tracks. It was not always particularly pleasant. For female vocals, it sounded a bit sibilant at times too, and sometimes distant, so not necessarily a particular win on either of those. This does have, however, some sound attributes that are positive, the biggest of which being Soundstage. The sound signature of this reminds me a lot of a headphone that is very well known in the hi-fi community. Not a headphone that I particularly enjoy, but a headphone that is very well known, and it was well received by a decent bit of the community. I'm talking about the HD800. So this does very, very big Soundstage and has a warm leaning sound with a big treble peak, just like the HD800. Now, I think the treble peak on this is much more severe than on the HD800, but it is a similar sound, a similar characteristic, a similar presentation to that headphone with a similarly very large soundstage. Now, this doesn't go anywhere near that headphone in terms of detail. This does not go anywhere near that headphone in terms of its soundstage or imaging or comfort, but in all of those aspects, I can see similarities, and there's definitely a bit of an overlap in the performance of these headphones in those regions. Unfortunately, like the HD800, it does suffer from a fair bit of sibilance. Not something that you can easily fix. I tried rolling pads, but with every pad I would throw on this headphone, I would get worse results. And the only solution, it seemed, was to try and EQ the headphone. And while I did get relatively better results EQing it. I was able to get rid of some of the treble spikes, calm down the warmth of the headphone a little bit, and still retain most of the soundstage. But it still isn't as good overall as things like the HD6XX or the 600 ohm version of the DT880. In fact, I would say this is significantly more sibilant than the 600 ohm DT880. But it does do soundstage in a way that none of those headphones do, and it is extremely comfortable. So if those are the two things you were looking for, large soundstage and comfort, this might be a viable option for you. Two specific things I thought this sounded very good for. Movie soundtracks, interestingly enough, like the Westworld soundtrack where you get lots of, specifically season 2, where there's lots of like Japanese style drums and plucked strings and flutes. That sounded phenomenal on here, as well as instrumental jazz. So if you like instrumental jazz, big soundstage, and movie soundtracks specifically, I think this is a go-to. Anything that is acoustic, like guitar, I don't think is going to work well with the warmth and lower mid-range on this. Anything electronic may be okay, but you are definitely going to dip into sibilant territory. The same thing with rap. I didn't particularly enjoy rap on this headphone because of the sibilant vocals. So overall, not an entirely negative review, but it is an interesting headphone. It has its place, it has its strong points that stand out and make it a different headphone from the crowd. Is it one that I'm personally going to be purchasing? No. However, I do think there are a fair number of people who could enjoy this, and I do see a spot for it in the market, being a headphone with unique traits such as the ones that it presents. So that is all I have for you guys today. If you liked this video, please leave a like down below and a comment letting me know what you want to see in the future. If you want to support the channel and get early access to my videos, you can at the Patreon linked in the video description, or you can get an analog shirt that helps make videos like these possible. If you want to get active in the community, you can at forum.hifiguides.com, and as always, don't forget to stick around and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Until the next one, guys. Peace.